All right, let's bring in our experts that Matt mentioned moments ago, Candace Torito and Michael Fontroy. Let's keep talking about this District 6 race here with McLean Delaney and David Trone. Just to get your take on what we're seeing play out here. You're talking about these candidates spending millions and millions of their own dollars. How did it get so nasty?
There can only be one winner. It's as simple as that.
Is it a fight to the finish,
yeah,
right?
I mean, it's almost like the Hunger Games, right? So they are, these are two very successful people when we sort of measure it by material terms. They're both very wealthy people who aren't used to losing, who are always winning, so to speak. But in this case, you can only have one winner. And I have to say, I took note of something that April McLean Delaney said, that she wanted to fight for democracy, right? And I don't doubt her when she says that. I don't dispute it. I do think it's a little curious, though, when you're willing to spend millions of dollars to win a race that, in some respects, runs counter to the idea of democracy, where people are able to assess candidates and then make a decision based on their interest and what they think is best for the community overall. And for me, at least, the just overwhelming amount of money undermines that to some
From both candidates?
From both candidates. No, and by the way, not just in this race, but across the country. And in this case, we're talking about candidates who spent their own money.
Right.
Last week in DC, we were talking about outside groups spending money to target candidates. And so I have a concern about the excessive impact money has on our elections. And I just find it curious that somebody who's spending millions is expressing concern about democracy.
Well, I guess money talks, right? And in this case, with these ads, it is not a good story. I mean, everything is negative.
Yeah. I think I'm one of the few people, because I just enjoy intellectually studying negative ads. You know, I'll be sad to see these go. I've been interested to see them come through.
Oh, this is a sad
Well,
night
we
for
could
you.
Yeah, I know.
We'll just play some back
Thank
for you.
you. I
You can
appreciate that.
They're on
revisit the
YouTube.
best
You can find them.
Yeah,
Don't
plenty.
worry.
I know. I'm sure that you'll all just give them all to me. Nobody will miss them but me. But you know, something that Michael said is funny, and I noted before we started tonight that one of the smaller, maybe more process issues of the campaign, because there's kind of policy issues up for discussion. I think those have unfortunately largely gotten lost in the sauce in Congressional 6, and a lot of it has been focused on the process. But one of the things that they have kind of been snipping at each other about is who has the most grassroots support, which is sort of hilarious when you're talking about two multimillionaires who are self-funding. But
And neither of them live in the district.
Yeah.
That is really fascinating.
Isn't that wild?
That for all of these years, in recent years, there's been a Delaney or a Trone in the office, and neither of them live
Constitution
in the
doesn't
district
require it.
that they represent.
Right.
I wonder if the voters actually know that. Do they know that these two people who say they're the best people to represent them in District 6 don't even live there?
I don't think it's probably very likely. It's not something that they're going to talk about and advertise a whole lot. But yeah, it's a little wild, but not required by the Constitution.
You were saying that this is not unusual.
It's not unusual. There are other states around the country that operate in this way. Florida is a famous example. It does call the question, though, like, do you really know the district if you don't live in it? Now, having said that, these are people running to serve in the House of Representatives, and the members in the House and the members of the Senate are effectively the board of directors of the world's most powerful corporation, the United States government, right?
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily vote just on things that impact your constituents. Every vote you cast has impact across the country. So I think there's an intellectual argument that can be made around not living in the district not being a problem, if I could put it that way. But I do think that there are some real questions to be asked about how much can you really be committed to a community that you don't live in. And there's a sort of extension to that, and that is folks who move into a district just to run, or move into a state just to run. We heard some of this when Hillary Clinton ran for the U.S. Senate in New York. You know, so that's also a part that has to be addressed. But I don't think most voters in that district know that neither of them live there.
Well, they've never said
Wow.
it. They
Right.
never
Yeah.
said,
And even if
we're
they-
of you, we're from you, we know what it's like. They've never said that in those ads.
Right, right. They're just fighting with each other over who
Yeah.
has more of those supporters. And honestly, if it comes down to it, I think even if voters did know, I'm not sure that it makes much of a difference because both of your primary choices here are are equal on that matter, right? So there's not a whole lot of daylight to be or contrast to be drawn between those two. If it was just one of them that was outside, maybe that would be a little bit more of a story. But you know, it's unfortunately it's just it's a little loud with the negative ads. Again, we're focusing a little bit; those are focusing a little bit more on process than policy. But something we also talked about earlier was, especially maybe in Congressional District 5, we've been talking about the power or lack thereof of third-party spending of PAC money, right? And just there's growing kind of an anti-sentiment in Maryland against candidates accepting PAC money. There are several candidates that we'll talk about tonight that have refused it and made a big kind of public gesture of refusing PAC money. If you are one of those voters who, to whom something like that is important, right? That you think PAC money influences candidates too much and it shouldn't be involved in elections. There are a couple of different options for ways that candidates can raise money. One of them is to self-fund, right? And so we've got two multi-millionaires here who are self-funding. And so it'll be very interesting to see which of these comes out on top, if it kind of even matters in the days and weeks that follow the election. But certainly, as we've talked about, David Trone is spending a lot of money. This race there was a very expensive race in Kentucky early last month. This one is poised to become either the most expensive congressional primary like in history, or maybe second place.
Now, is that because of David Trone? Because he is spending so much of his own money? Is that why we're here? Because I think about that district and why is...
It's all about the candidates spending their own money. You're referring to the Tom Massey race in Kentucky last month. That had a ton of money in it, but it almost all came from outside the district. And so that's sort of a very interesting juxtaposition in the ways in which money, either internally from a candidate or externally from an outside organization or series of outside organizations, can really help impact what goes on in a race.
You all have studied where the money goes, where the money's come from, but also the messaging. We see and we can feel all of these ads that seem to have a negative bent coming in. Are they negative because they work?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, is that what it is?
Even if they all sound alike?
Yeah, so there's tons of research on this. This has been put to bed a long time ago. Candidates run negative ads because they work. And going positive is great sort of theoretically, but practically doesn't drive voters. Voters vote because they're agitated about something, whether it's their own economy or they hate one of the candidates or whatever the issue may be.
So they don't vote because they like somebody?
No. The two primary emotions here at work, if you're running a positive ad, you're trying to make voters feel, generally speaking, enthusiastic, right? I've made the right choice. I'm supporting this person. They're doing a good job. Hooray for me, being so discerning in the right way. A negative ad is meant to jolt voters out of that comfort, right? There's only a real motivation to act and specifically to change your behavior. Right, so to change your support from maybe no candidate to some candidate or from this candidate to that candidate, if I have a reason to suspect that my existing choice is incorrect or is bad for me or puts me in danger, the larger, easier way to say that is to be a little bit scary, right?
Does that, does that backfire? I think of this race in D.C. recently where it got negative toward the end, and you heard from some voters saying, "Oh, this person got too negative."
Well, certainly,
I don't like that.
Yeah, and certainly not all ads are created equal, right?
Okay.
Just because an ad is a negative ad doesn't mean that it will work. It has to be well produced. It has to. There's a lot of pieces that go into it. And if you imagine if the attacks are baseless, then that will land differently than if the attacks are well documented and can pick up steam in other kind of modes and hit voters on the radio or from their friends and family, right? And so not every message is equal. Generally speaking, on average, negative ads tend to be more heavily cited, like even if it's just the bill that someone is saying so-and-so voted this way, right? That seems so there's often that viewers actually see negative ads as more informative, even though their intention is to make those voters feel discomfort in general sense.
And one additional point. Sometimes the goal of these negative ads is to demoralize voters,
Yep.
to keep them from actually showing up. Because, you know, if I'm running a campaign and I know that I don't really have what it takes to win, I may want to try to dirty up the opponent so that the opponent's voters stay home. Mm-hmm. And so the negative campaigning piece, it's corrosive, it's not useful, it doesn't bring out the best in us, and at the same time works better than almost anything.
So it's here to stay, is what we're hearing you say.
Well, look, I teach a course on the presidency and can show you ads from 200 years ago,
Yeah.
literally, in which they were saying far worse things about each other than what we're hearing right now.
So it sounds like there's no more when they go low, we go high.
No,
anymore.
It's
when you go low, we're going down in the gutter.
I got a bulldozer here. We're going to go below you.
Well, theoretically, there is a way to be nice about a negative ad. There is a way to make a civil attack.
There was one ad I remember for Montgomery County executives where they said something like, well, they're all nice guys, but where they're all good Democrats.
I think you mean
but,
Friedson, right?
But there
Three
was
good
only
Democrats,
one,
right?
But there was only one
See,
I
it
can
worked.
think of.
She remembers it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. No,
But that was the nice nasty. I
right.
think.
Yeah.
That
And
was
there's
so
some research on this
nasty.
that the civility of the attack. So maybe a non-civil attack would be if I add a choice adjective when I'm describing you, and I call you a corrupt incumbent or an entrenched incumbent. Right? Those adjectives start to add a little bit more of a personal sting. But there is a way to attack a record and a platform or a perspective in politics or on governance, and not use those uncivil words and that uncivil language. Perhaps that works a little bit better and kind of targets the attack a little bit more. But generally speaking, that doesn't, negative ads working is kind of the larger message. Whether someone is nice within that negative attack, that's going to still vary from a campaign to another campaign and kind of the gut of the candidate.
I
Go
thought it was interesting. Our Matt Gregory spoke with McLean Delaney and Trone in the final days before today, and they both pointed the finger at the other.
Yeah.
He attacked me first.
Yeah.
She put out the first negative ad. So clearly, they're trying to defend themselves against the negative ads.
We're